Finally, I've been waiting for this Parkhurst boot. Their Captoe Richmond style, but in their 618 last and Stitchdown construction. How you going? Welcome to Bootlosophy. My name is Tech and I'm working on Wadjuk Country in Perth here in WA. This time I'm welcoming this Parkhurst model. Now, by the time you see this video, due to my busy schedule and the way producing for YouTube works, this model will have been around for a while. But I am formally welcoming this model to my collection because I've been waiting for it for a while. This is Parkhurst's Richmond Captoe service boot model. It's been around since Parkhurst first started in 2018, and in fact my first Parkhurst boot was an 18 last at Richmond in raised reverse mohawk from Charles F Stead. It is, I think, the second brown furry boot you see in my channel's opening music sequence. So if it's been around for so long, why am I so excited? That's because after moving production to Spain in 2022 and later finding a specialist Stitchdown factory in Portugal a year or so later, they have been producing Stitchdown plain toe Allen models in the 618 last from there. I have loved the fit of the 618 last, probably my best fitting last, and the Stitchdown quality has been incredible. Out of Parkhurst's models, the Richmond and maybe the Delaware, a Brogue Captoe, have been my favorites. But in the last couple of years, I've been buying 618 lasted Allen boots because that's what they made in that last. So when Andrew announced the Richmond was being made on the 618 last and also using the Stitchdown construction in Portugal, I jumped. In that release though, this was the only uppers I liked because I already had several pairs of Allen boots in the various Stead Ramblers and Kudu and Waxy Commander uppers that Andrew offered. However, I'm now gearing up to buy more 618 Richmonds in a Waxy Commander and whatever else Andrew will release next. The new Allegheny is already on my radar. For new viewers, this style is probably best categorized as a service boot because of its characteristics of 6-inch height at the shaft, sleek and slim shape of the last, and a low block heel. Now, I know that description is more or less shared with some work boots and some hard to characterize work/derby boots like the Iron Ranger. But this is a modern service boot shape. The sleekness is what pushes it into a service boot category and assisted therein by the attachment of a commando lug sole and the antiqued brass hardware. It has a single piece backstay, very World War II US Marines boondocker boot style. In this case, it has a 3-stitch real Captoe, and it's in a Stitchdown construction, which I'll explain later. The contrasting stitches that you see on the dark olive Roughout look sensational. Check out the website link below to see Parkhurst's other models. Now, in case you've had your head in a barrel or are new to heritage boots, let me briefly talk about the brand. Parkhurst was founded in 2018 by financial analyst turned boot designer and maker Andrew Savisco. Now, I've actually known Andrew for a while now through corresponding with him when I chose to buy, asking him whether he could reserve them, also talked to him about Leathercare. But you can go and watch my interview with Andrew, which I think is very revealing about his motivations, vision, and goals for the brand. When I talk about the brand, just know that it was and still is a one-man band. When Andrew started, he designed his lasts, that's the molds on which the specific shape of the boots are reproduced. He designed the boots and shoes, and then he contracted a factory in upstate New York to make them. In those days, he would receive the almost completed boots and finish them himself by attaching the heels in his basement, box them, and ship them out to you. His model was a direct-to-consumer model, and he made his boots in small batches because that was what his savings allowed in capital investment. So in many ways, this still exists. Often you would look at his website one day, You'd like a pair, but maybe decide to think it over. And then when you got back a day or so later, found that it was gone, or at least gone in your size. Sometimes it might restock if people like the leather, but sometimes it was a once-off. So if you're really serious as a boot collector, sometimes a Parkhurst purchase was a unique, never to be reproduced collector's item. How we all forget, but if you think about 2018 when he started and what happened in early 2020, Andrew had hardly got started when COVID came and shut down normal life for a period of time. This had devastating consequences for an already shaky US industry in old-fashioned shoemaking. Supply chains extended almost infinitely, and Andrew found that he was unable to secure material, or if he could, wait times and pricing made finishing items unpredictable. In those times, a visit to Parkhurst's website might reveal maybe only 4 or 5 models in very limited sizes. Andrew doesn't say, but that would have been financially ruinous times for him. And then that wasn't all. The New York factory, facing lack of supply and contracting brands who were themselves squeezing in, closed. So left high and dry, it says a lot for Andrew's personality that his contacts in the industry helped him by giving him contacts in other US factories, which unfortunately didn't work out for him because of minimum order requirements. And eventually, they gave him contacts in Spain. He made the difficult decision to move production to Spain, but in my opinion, that was a true phoenix from the ashes moment, because I have publicly stated that the quality of Goodyear welt production coming out of the Spanish factory was much better and more consistent than from the Batavia, New York factory. Rebuilding, Andrew was introduced to a manufacturer in Portugal who specialized in stitch-down construction, and Andrew took his new 618 last over there. Today, Parkhurst is still a small batch brand, but the small batches are getting bigger, in full sizes from 7 to 12.5, with most sizes having the halves available. However, because all of Parkhurst's available lasts are combination lasts, and more of that later, there are no other widths available. They still run out though. Parkhurst will tend to drop stock once or twice a season, fall, winter, and then spring, summer. And soon after the drops, the sizes start to sell out, and some makeups will also sell out as well. So if you like something, don't be slow. And just for the absence of doubt, I have no commercial connection with Andrew, and every pair of the 20 plus pairs of Parkhurst boots in my collection have been bought by me. No, I just love the passion of the man and the integrity of the brand. And again, I have publicly stated that if you like service boots, you really don't need to buy a Viberg. Just buy any Parkhurst boot and you get the design, looks, and almost the quality for less than half the price. Okay, let's look at how these are put together. And I will start from the bottom and go up. It is a stitch-down construction boot, which means that the boot is lasted or formed into its distinct shape over that shape last, and then the front half of the bottom edge of the uppers are flared outwards. The uppers there are then stitched to the midsole and the outsole. In this case, one stitch goes through the midsole before the outsole is glued on, and then a second stitch is stitched into the uppers, the midsole, and the outsole. Unlike a Goodyear welted boot, there isn't a cavity formed by a welt that goes around the edge of the boot. So there isn't really enough space where some cork can be placed to add a little shock absorption, because they basically sit on the midsole. So stitch down boots made in this way, without that intervening layer of cork or foam, can be quite firm on the footfall. At the back, this kind of stitch down turns the back half inwards and is then stitched and glued to the insole and the midsole before the heel is put on. The heel is made up of a couple of leather lifts before the rubber top lift is put on. The heel stacks are all glued and nailed. The heel top lift and the rubber outsole is a proprietary Parkhurst product. It's a fairly firm commando lugged sole and is a full length. So what you've got under your feet is a full rubber outsole, a leather midsole, and a leather insole. And inside is a leather half sock liner under the heel with a small piece of foam underneath. A commander sole with this pattern of radiating lugs and crosses in the middle was invented by a UK company, now in administration unfortunately, Itzhide. While it's thought that Vibram from Italy invented the commander sole in the 1930s, my research has shown that they made a lug sole for mountaineering called the Karamata sole, which was similar but not in this pattern. Itzhide started making the commander sole in 1939-1940 when it was commissioned by the Royal Marines, who were starting to come off shipboard duty and becoming a sea-to-shore commando raiding party. They needed a rubber outsole on their service boots, which otherwise had steel hobnails for grip. Those were too slippery coming off boats, as well as being very noisy. Moving on inside the boot, between the leather midsole and the leather insole is a steel shank that's inserted between the heel and the center of the foot. This provides arch support and rigidity, without which your boots would have a tendency to sink into that gap and tire your feet at the end of the day. The uppers are from famous Leeds UK tannery, Charles F Stead, known for their suede leathers and more recently their shrunken wax suedes like Rambler and Mohawk, as well as exotics like Moose and Kudu. It is a full-grain wax roughout, about 2.5 millimeters thick and with a supple, waxy feel. As a roughout, it's turned inside out so that the inside is a smooth, full-grain leather, whereas the outside is the flesh side. This dark olive is a very versatile color and goes with any earth or neutral colored outfits. In the sunlight, it looks like a ripe olive color of brown-green. Indoors, it can go from a dark brown to even black and maybe have a mottled effect. The pattern's a very simple one. There's a vamp, captoe, quarters, and a backstay. The quarters are quadruple stitched very accurately. The toe cap is triple stitched in a 1+2 pattern, and the rest are either double or single stitched. Now note that this toe cap is a real toe cap. In other words, a full vamp is cut and then the toe cap is stitched onto it so that at that point there are two pieces of uppers leather, the leather lining on the inside and the toe puff, which I think is also leather, although I think it could also be celastic. The heel counter inside the heel pocket is leather also. The boot is lined in the vamp with a soft leather, but not in the shaft, with just the grain side showing. The stitching, nailing, and construction overall is very clean and neat. Now to turn to Leathercare. Andrew says that this roughout was tanned and waxed to his specifications by Charles F Stead, using both an oil base and a wax finish. This means that it should have enough waxes and oils to withstand more than the usual before needing any conditioning. All you need is a firm suede brush to brush the roughout nap from time to time to keep it clean, spot clean with a suede cleaner as necessary, and brush off dirt and dust regularly. As for conditioning, Andrew says to use either a wax or an oil, but my preference is to use an oil-based conditioner such as liquid neat's foot oil. That seems to absorb into the roughout more than a wax, which in my experience seems to sit on the surface. But be very sparing. What I do is just oil your hands, rub them, and then use your hands to rub the conditioner in. Don't pour it all over or even brush it on. Let it dry and then use the suede brush to re-raise the nap. Parkhurst's 618 last, like all their lasts, is a combination last. But first, I've said last on and off in this review, so for those new to boots, a last is a foot-shaped mold like this, which is shaped by the designer to look like what he wants the final boot to look like. The 618 is a combination last, which means that it's not all one width. It starts at the heel as a B or C width heel, quite narrow, so as to grip your heel, and then it widens proportionately to slightly over an E width at the ball of the foot before it tapers into the sharpish almond-shaped toe. I measure US 8.5 in D width, that's regular average, on the Brannock device, and I take an 8 in this last. What that gives me is a well-gripped heel and a snug waist, but a lot of comfort in the ball of my foot, especially as my right foot is a little over standard D width. At my toes, despite the pointy look, there is no squish at all because the length is adapted slightly so that the taper from the wider ball fits all your toes in without squeezing. As I've said, this is one of my most comfortable lasts for a snug, firm handshake fit. However, If your feet are much more than an E width, I think you may have to size up. So the best thing is to talk to Andrew. As I've also said though, because of the construction, it is a firm feel under your feet. Until the soles break, you will feel the lugs as you stand and walk. Luckily, these are lower lugs, so it mitigates that a bit. The other side of that firmness, of course, is that there are less layers of leather and cork with no welt, so it's quite easy to flex at the beginning. Comfort-wise, and these aren't really broken in yet as I hold them today, comfort-wise, they are getting better and better the more I wear them. So to sum up, these are well made, pretty, and as comfortable as heritage boots can be. They list at the US mid 400s and they land in Australia for about 600 Aussie. That price compares well to equivalents like Grant Stone, Red Wing, Caswell, Truman, and Oak Street bootmakers, as well as the original brands like Ellen Edmonds and Wolverine. Quality-wise, they are all in the same ballpark. Now, I love Parkhurst boots, so I'm not a fair judge, but in my personal opinion, these are great value. Okay, so there we are. I hope you enjoyed this video and found this review useful. Help me out, will you, by clicking on like, and if you would like to see more of these reviews, think of subscribing. It helps me to grow my channel, and what it does is it helps you get served more boot information from myself and the other boot reviewers out there. So until next time, take care and see you again soon.